So last week, where we left off was I introduced you to a B2B lead generation framework. And we talked a fair bit around defining your target audience, which included market segmentation, customer personas, as well as setting your goals and objectives around what it is you wanted your leads to do once you actually acquired them or you attracted them to your website. And so what are the things you want to do? Tonight, we're going to solidly look at developing content and lead magnets. I introduced you last week to the concept of lead magnets. I'll return to that definition tonight, just a quick refresher, but we're going to dive into content marketing, which is a huge subject. So hopefully by the end of tonight, you will have some interesting ideas and things that you'll find cool, or perhaps you might want to explore. In the chat is the slide deck, a link to the slide deck. So if you want to download the slide deck, there's a PDF so you can follow along. And there are lots and lots of great links there that I have as well that I'll get to at the end of my presentation. So make time, or do try to find some time to focus on that. So let's get going. So today, what am I going to cover? Basically, we're going to talk about developing a B2B content marketing strategy. We are going to sort of talk about how do you map your content across your conversion funnel. So this is really key as we move forward. We're going to look at our conversion funnel as well as content marketing. We're going to explain the purpose of content calendars and the role that they play. They're really important and can help you stay focused on what you need to do. I'm going to go over a few content marketing do's and don'ts, definitely not exhaustive, but a few key ones that I tend to find people might not think about. And then I'm going to list and give you several resources around content creation tools and technologies, as well as videos and articles that I think will be helpful, because I can't go into everything tonight, but I want to make sure that you could actually leave tonight with at least a bit of a game plan and some resources that help get you going. So the first thing I'm going to do is a quick review of conversion funnels. So some people call these sales funnels, some people call them customer journeys. Basically, how do you get a potential customer, to become a customer and hopefully ultimately an advocate? We're going to go through that. Some basic content marketing strategy, more around the questions you might want to ask around your content marketing practices, and then best practices for content calendars. I'm going to go over them, give you a few examples, but also talk about some tweaks and things that I think really make content calendars really shine. Then we're going to talk about some content marketing do's and don'ts, some tips. I'm then going to do a huge brain dump, and this is probably, hopefully I'll get to most of these, of different types of content and perhaps recommended tools for them. So this is where there's a lot of details. I think I have somewhere around 70 different types of content that I'll be covering tonight. Then some action items and next steps for you to think about as you move forward after tonight's workshop. And then I have a couple of slides with lots and lots of links and resources, and I will go through those just very briefly, but they're there so that you can later on look at some other tools and articles that can hopefully provide a little bit more context to what I'm presenting tonight. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is sort of the whole conversion funnel. And I think this is really important when we're thinking about content, because content in and of itself should live against your funnel. So you should map it against what you want people to do and when they want that content. So at the top of the funnel, we have someone who visits your website or who's viewing your content. Maybe they're following you on social media. So this is what we'd call the top of the funnel. Then the middle of the funnel is maybe there's an ad that they see and they click through on it, or there's a link and they click through and then they read some content. Maybe you might get them to subscribe to a newsletter or do something that allows you to build a relationship with them. And then bottom of the funnel is really where we kind of get those qualified leads that hopefully prospects that can become customers. And ultimately, the journey does not stop at the customer level when they become your customer. In fact, the journey we're finding begins there because we want them to usually become repeat customers, but more importantly, brand advocates. If you remember last week, we talked about 84% of business-to-business sales start with a referral. So you want your customers to basically be referring your services to others. Now, in terms of what you want to do, and I'm just giving you a short list here, so this is not exhaustive, you want to start thinking about your content based on where your customers are and where are they in this journey. So the things that you want for awareness are going to be ads and, articles and things that you post, engaging posts. That's sort of getting people really aware of who you are. But then when you want them to consider what you're doing, you might have different kinds of ads, or you might have different kinds of content, blog articles. This could be white papers, this could be case studies, things along those lines. And then you have conversion, and conversion would be very targeted ads, but it could be specific offers that you're doing to kind of get them to convert. So often we talk about scarcity. So maybe there's a limited time offer or limited inventory, or this is only available, for a certain period of time. It could be email messages and things along those. Basically, lead magnets allow you, if you're doing marketing, and then there's a bit of a high touch piece, to then really solidify and close. Remember, we were talking last week about nurturing and closing the deals. So using those things and landing pages, we'll talk about that next week. And then finally, loyalty. How do you build up loyalty and those brand advocates? And you need content to allow people to be really good brand advocates. It's much easier for me to be a brand advocate if you give me content to share, things that I'm really happy to share. So content doesn't stop when they become a customer. In fact, giving them content to be really great salespersons on your behalf is a really important thing to consider. And managing your community so that they're always engaged. So this is something I wanted to just highlight, is that we have our conversion funnel, and what does that look like for you? And then more importantly, what kind of information is necessary as your customers move through that entire sort of conversion funnel? Now, what I really want to highlight here is I want to sort of look at, content strategy. And what I really want to talk about are questions, because I think these are questions that every company should answer, especially in B2B, to make sure that it makes sense. So the first question I want you to really think about is, what? So what are your content objectives? What are you trying to do? I often hear from business to business companies that they want to be seen as thought leaders, or they want something in that space. And if that's the case, then you need to create, really good pieces of content that show that you have your finger on the pulse, that you know what's happening in your industry, that you really are that thought leader, and you need to share that with your community. Also, what does your community, or what do your customers want to hear from you? So again, much more of a customer-centric approach. What is it they want to hear from you? Not necessarily what do you have to sell to them, but what do they want to hear, and what would they find beneficial? What topics are we going to cover? So what are some topics that we know are of interest? And again, I would keep this quite broad. We often really get focused on our product, but if we think about those customer personas that we were talking about last week, they have a lot of interest, and there might be a lot of things around the periphery or the edges of what we do that are still of interest to our customers. So let's look at them much more holistically, and not just based on what we have to offer. And then finally, what formats are we going to use? Are we going to do blogs, podcasts, videos, infographics? Is it going to be audio? What the formats are we going to use? And a lot, again, will depend on those customer personas. How do they consume content? What kind of formats do they enjoy consuming? Then there's the why. Why does anyone care about our content? Right now, there's so much content being created every day. So you really have to think about, why is this important? I am a big proponent of quality over quantity. So I would rather that my companies that I advise do one really great piece of content per month that really gets used and is right on target, than trying to fill 7 days a week and just have content, and some of it's really good and some of it's almost noise. So why does anyone care about our content, and why are we creating this content? So thinking about why are you creating it will also help you create content that hopefully can deliver exactly what you want. Now, everyone says we're creating because we want sales, and that's great. But I'll tell you later, every piece of content cannot be about sales. That gets very boring and tedious, and eventually we tune you out. So what are some of the other reasons why you're creating this content? Is it to build community? Is it to build connections? Do you want those long-term relationships? Things along those lines. How are we adding value to our customers or community? Again, one of the big things that I really will say a couple of times tonight is make sure that you are adding value to your customers. With every piece of content, they get a piece of value. If there is no value in it, they will stop paying attention and they will not give you another chance to show them that you can enrich their lives, right? Or enrich their work or whatever the environment is. So adding value, really key. Every time you look at a piece of content, are you adding value? And especially in B2B, where people don't have tons of time, making sure that they see value in the content you create is very, very important. How are we going to deliver our message? So again, are we delivering it via social media? Are we delivering it via email newsletters? Are we delivering it via blogs? How are we planning on getting our message to our customers? And part of it is, where are they? You want to go where they are. So trying to think about, well, they have to subscribe to my newsletter. That's great. But as we'll talk about with some of those lead magnets, you want to get them to sign up for that. But there might be people who live in other pockets of the internet, and we want to make sure we can reach them too. And then how should we say it? What's our tone? What's our language? What's our imagery? What is that? How do we say what we need to say? Different industries have very different cultures. Some are very casual, some are very professional and formal. So what is a tone? What is a language? What is going to be really receptive to your customers? You notice I haven't talked about your products at all. This is basically thinking about who you want to connect with and making sure that what you deliver is appealing to them. So where? So one of the things that I always want to think about is, where are you going to get your content? And again, with content, also, what kind of content? Play to your strengths. I've often had some clients of mine say, "Oh, I want to do video," and then they realize they don't have any video editing skills. So if video editing is not your skill, find something that is. Although later on, I will show you some really easy to use video tools that are out there. But again, assess your limitations, play to your strengths, make sure that the content you're producing is something that you feel comfortable that you can do and that will not stress you, because most of us have enough stress in our lives. So make sure that it's something that also reflects who you are and how you do things. Where will we curate content? So I will get to this shortly, but the idea is that not all content you you market or you put out there needs to be your own. In fact, it probably shouldn't be your own. It shows that you are a really great digital citizen by sharing articles and research and things from other people in your industry, or people who have complementary products, right? Give them a little bit, share your spotlight is what I like to say. So are there places that you can find content that is of interest to your audience, but perhaps is written by someone else? And that's something I really want you to spend some time thinking about. And then where will it be published? Again, literally, where are you going to publish things? What platforms? Are you going to go to LinkedIn? Are you going to Twitter, Instagram? Where are you going to publish the content? On your website, on a blog? What is that? Where is it going to live, right? So these are all questions you want to think about with your content strategy. And you need to answer these before you embark on anything, because it will really impact how you can deliver and execute. When? So when will our content be published is a really good question to ask. How frequently do you want it to be published? Again, play to your strengths and do something that you can sustain. I am a huge proponent of, like I said, if you can do once a month and do it well, then do once a month. Don't sign up to or set expectations that you're going to do things, 3 days a week or 5 days a week, and then you kind of fall behind. You're better off just being solid and consistent. So when are you going to publish your content? And here's the other thing. When will your content need to be updated? A lot of people think, I'm just going to put content out there and it's awesome. Sometimes content expires or it needs to be updated to be more relevant. It also allows you to repurpose old posts if something new has happened. So are we looking at our content as something that we revisit, not just that we publish, but that we actually revisit and update and maintain? And then finally, who will be responsible for producing the content? So who is responsible for creating and producing the content? And it might be an individual, it might be a consultant you're working with, or a group of different people. So just being very clear who's responsible for what. is very important. Again, who will maintain the content over time? And then the last question is who will monitor and interact with the content? And this is largely around, in some ways, community engagement. So it's great to put content out there, but what if you get a lot of comments and people refuting what you said? Do you have the time to get back to them in a timely manner? Because if you don't, it's going to look very stale. So have you thought about also the time it takes to support the content that you're putting out there, and to make sure that if you are throwing things out there, that you have someone who is monitoring them and managing that content and maintaining it, but also maintaining those relationships with the community. So all of these questions are really important questions around your content strategy. And I would argue that these are the first questions you should answer. And once you have this, a lot of the other stuff will flow pretty seamlessly. And the tactics and how we do it, we've touched upon it here, but then it will flow much better than trying to do it in a different way. So next, content calendars. Content calendars are a really great way to create literally a calendar of what's going to be published, where, and when. And there are some amazing templates. At the end of my presentation today, I have a couple of templates, one from Hootsuite and one from HubSpot, that I think are really good examples of content calendars. So it can literally be a monthly calendar like this one, or it could also be something that's an Excel spreadsheet. So it doesn't have to be very fancy, where you have different sort of platforms that you're going to do, the day, the time, what kind of content type is it that you're going to post? Is it a specific topic? What is the copy that you're going to have there? Are there any links? Are there any assets around it? So content calendars can really help you organize and sort of give you a sense of what is it I have to do? Also, if you see something from someone else and it fits into a specific topic, you can grab it and put it away and know that I'll be posting that in a few weeks. Or, if it's evergreen, as we say in marketing, so it's content that isn't time specific, you can sort of use it in future weeks and schedule them. So this is a great thing to keep in mind, a content calendar. Now, a lot of content calendars are very much social media focused. And that's great, but I would also encourage you to include in your content calendar blog posts, if those are going on your websites. If you're doing podcasts, then add, video podcasts or audio podcasts to your content calendar. So any kind of content that you're creating doesn't have to be just social media. Put it in your content calendar, and it's a great way to do that. I'm a huge fan of themes, because I think sometimes we all run out of ideas around what to do. And so, curated content is a question someone's asking. So curated content might be, I am a company that is targeting the cannabis industry, which is really exciting, and we have a few of those in our cohort this time around. But maybe a recent market research report came out about the future and the forecast of the cannabis industry. You didn't write it, but it's something about your industry. So you would curate it, because probably if you were targeting retailers or producers in the cannabis industry, they would all probably want to know what is being forecast in our industry. And so you could say, hey, if you're in the cannabis industry, here's a wonderful market research report, or here's a press release about, where people are in seeing that the cannabis industry is going. So curated content is not content that you've created or that you have written or that you own the rights to. It is content that you have found living on the internet that you think will be of interest to others. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect, great. Just like my mouse is doing funny things. So themes, I'm a huge fan of themes, and themes really allow you to kind of set expectations and also know what you're looking for, because sometimes, we run out of ideas. So this is a weekly theme. I'm not saying that anyone has to do a weekly theme or, do every day a daily theme. But you might have week 1 of every month, we're going to do this, and we're going to highlight, for example, a really interesting customer we're working with. On the B2B side, that's what I've seen is, let's highlight a customer. So, once a month we do a customer profile, and it's not a case study. It's just about who they are, how they're maybe using your solution, and, and all the amazing things they're doing doing in the world, right? So promoting them, featuring them, right? So that everyone knows that once a month, maybe the first week of the month, there will be a customer profile, right? That also means at some point, if you want to get several customer profiles, you can kind of get those ready, and then you can promote them for future months, and you don't have to think about that. So something to keep in mind around the themes. I think that, no more questions. Okay. You know, again, what are the themes? Also, what's really important to your industry? I ask. So, what are some of the things that would be some, as I said, some are playful and they might want to do a trivia day, but maybe others are about, what are some of the most innovative developments in our industry, right? So, what are some of the innovative products or the innovative services, or just even crazy ideas that are happening? And maybe that's part of your thought leadership as well, right? And you do that on a regular basis. So think about that and sort of create your themes that are appropriate. And then you can find content. Either you create it yourself or you get it from others that fit into each one of these themes. Any questions so far? Okay. I think one just came up. Yes. Okay. So Robert is asking about curated content, which is awesome because I think that brings me to my next one. Oh no, not yet. Okay. So Robert, I'm going to answer your question in a few slides, and then I'll get to that about sort of curation and curating content. A couple of things that I would recommend for content calendar tweaks. These are sort of columns, if you will, or things that I see that I don't see in a lot of standard content calendar templates. So I would add these, and most templates are Excel spreadsheets, so it's easy to add. Add your target audience. Who is it that this is for? Some of you may have, remember last week, we might have had a primary market and a target market and a secondary target market. If you add your target audience for each post, for each piece of content, it becomes really clear that you have a good balance and that you're not just always posting to the same audience, but that you actually have a variety that appeals to perhaps several audiences that you are trying to target, and that there's a good balance there. So I always add target audience to my sort of my list of things that I want to keep an eye on. Content and media type, again, what is a type of it? Because I've talked to quite a few people doing B2B and they're like, oh yeah, we're always doing Instagram stories. That's great. But at some point, are you going to do a post? Because if I go to your Instagram account, I don't see the stories because they've disappeared. So make sure you have posts, make sure you have video, maybe make sure you have a podcast, audio, some images, infographics. And I know you guys are going, oh, I don't know how to do any of this. I'm going to give you some tips on where you can get some great templates for all of these things. So don't freak out just yet. But different kinds of content and media type appeal to different people. Not everybody wants to read. Some people listen, some people watch. So you want to have, what we call actually in teaching and in education, universal design for learning. And that means having a variety of different designs that you can communicate what you are doing. So think about different types and think about, remember last week, we talked about personality types and a variety of things in that space. Think about how does my community like to communicate, and definitely play to those strengths as well. So then the other question is dependencies. I like to think about, in some cases, your posts may be dependent on someone else completing part of it, or maybe you have to get something designed by someone else who isn't within your organization. So just write down any dependencies. If there are things within kind of your project plan that you have to then, this is dependent on this being completed, make sure you understand that, because that can be really important when you're trying to hit a specific deadline. And you want to know, if you're waiting for something and it doesn't come in on time, that's going to push when you can deliver ultimately. So any dependencies are really important. Again, I just want to highlight content themes and topics. Not all templates have this there. So if you decide that you want to have specific topics that you want to discuss, and those topics could be about a technology, it could be about, interesting customers, what they're doing, make sure that you have this in your content calendar so that also you can see that you have a variety of themes and topics that you're discussing. And so it's not always the same thing, because if it's always the same thing, we're going to get tired of reading about the same thing day in and day out. So think about complementary and other things that make sense. And then finally, comments and notes. Just have a place for comments and notes where you can just add whatever else doesn't fit into any one of the other buckets. And that sometimes is really helpful because I don't even know what that might be, but it's good to have. Now, there were a couple of questions here. Okay, so Okay, so I'm going to go to, so first question, curated guidelines. I'm going to get to that in my next slide. My favorite type of content to create. I don't really have a favorite type of content to create. And here's my answer, Catherine. My favorite content to create is the content that my customers want. So it has nothing to do with what I prefer. It's what they prefer. So literally it is about your customers and what is it that they like. I'm going to show you some websites where you can see what content has been shared and some stats on that. So that may give you some guidance around what is popular with people. And Sel says, how do you create content for B2C and B2C? I'm guessing B2B and B2C at the same time on the same social media page? Again, that's awesome question, Sal. I think my answer to you is really, this is where you need that content calendar and you just have a schedule. So on Tuesdays, we're doing a B2B post, and on Wednesdays or Thursdays, we're doing a B2C post. And I actually often will tell people like, we are focusing on these customers on these days and these customers on these days. So people then know and understand your schedule and know that, I don't need to check your social media on a Tuesday because that's not me, but on Wednesday, you have some really good nuggets that I want to pay attention to. So that's why you have a content calendar. So you really understand who am I targeting, and the right people understand when they should pay attention and when not to. So something to keep in mind there. Okay, now let's get into curated and uncurated. The curated piece, so here is what I find is the ideal, and I'm putting it in quotes, content mix. This is a guideline, so you don't have to adhere to it absolutely immediately. But in terms of the amount of posts and content that you create, about 10% of what you create should be promotional, meaning selling, specific call to action, things along those lines. So, like, oh, look what we're offering, click here to buy. About 10% of what you do should be that. Around 20%-ish. Now it could be, like I said, these are guidelines, but about 20%, 25% should be original content you create, content that is original to you based on your industry knowledge, based on your product knowledge, based on your customer knowledge, right? So this could be a customer profile, this could be an ebook, this could be a downloadable podcast, but they're original to you. No one else has created anything specifically like that, right? That doesn't mean someone hasn't created anything like it, but specifically with your perspective in mind. And the remaining amount, and this is probably the part that everybody's asking, 65% should be curated content. So curated content literally is content from others. So if people were asking about, do you need permission to reshare? So here's the thing. If you put out a piece of content and somebody shared it on their social network or within their customer group, yes, definitely give permission and tag that person to let them know that you are sharing it with your network. But if you have a piece of content and somebody were to share it and tag you and give you full credit for it, would you have an issue with that? Because in essence, what they're doing is they're promoting your content to their network. So what this really does is, here's the thing, by also sharing other people's content, you start building relationships with other companies. You start showing that you are a good digital citizen. You also start seeing that it isn't all about you. I like to say social media and even digital marketing is still social. And what this means is, if you are only talking about you, you're like that person at the party who's only talking about themselves and never asks questions of anyone else around them, or never shares anything from anyone else around them. And that's not a good place to be. So you want to show that you are generous enough to highlight others and to promote others. And then when you're doing that 25% of your original content, who do you think is going to be very happy to share your content with their networks? Because you've been so generous about sharing their content with yours. So this is definitely about building those relationships and finding people, and definitely give them credit. So this is why you don't want to take credit for it. You want to show them that you value what they're bringing to the community. And there's then that reciprocity, so reciprocal relationship, where when you then have something to share, they are much more likely to share with their networks and with their people that they are associated with, right? So it is a little bit of, scratch their back, scratch my back, scratch their back, we scratch each other's backs, and hopefully we all do better in the long run. So hopefully that helps people around, that curated content, and what that looks like. So curated content is literally content that you have found that is published publicly and available publicly, but published by others, not by you specifically. It is not, it's not created by your company, not created by you. It is something you found. How many times have we read an article that's so good? This is a great article. This is exactly what we've been talking about. It's our philosophy. Share that with your community, right? So it also shows that it's not about you always saying this is what we think, but you can show that others think the same thing too, right? So it's really, really important. The other thing that I think is really important here is it reduces the amount of content you have to create. So Catherine, back to your point, this also reduces the level of content you have to create. And usually that's the biggest thing that I hear from most companies, especially small startups, is we don't have time to create a lot of content. If 65% of your content is created by other people, that really reduces the amount of content that you have to create, but you still can be very active in the conversation, right? So you still can show your thought leadership, you still can show your knowledge, and you can do a lot of things in that space. So that is why we do this, to one, reduce our things, and one thing we want to keep. Again, blogs. So Sel was asking about blogs. How do you want to do that? You don't want to copy blog posts. So often what I do is I get guest bloggers. So I get someone who has a great blog post, and I will have them guest blog on my blog, or the other thing is what I might do is literally summarize a few key points and then link to the original blog post. There's nothing wrong with summarizing and creating an abstract that you write yourself about an article and saying, wow, this person, had some really key takeaways, and here are 3 of the points that they made, click here to read the full article, right? So again, being creative and being, shining that spotlight on others, but highlighting how what they're saying really supports what you're doing. So hopefully that helps as well. I'm just checking, any other questions? So again, would curated content come from web sources? Generally, yes, it will come from web sources. And then you would want to definitely give credit or reference where it came from. You would want to highlight that. Sometimes you reach out to them and say, hey, I think this was an amazing article. Are you okay with me sharing it on our social media page? I've never, ever had anyone say no, ever. Or is it okay if I include this with this little summary on my blog post? People are thrilled because you're actually sending traffic to them. And when you have something to post, they're more likely to take that post, put it on their site, and send traffic to you. So again, that's the whole thing, is that we're all working together to build a larger community. So some do's and don'ts. Do's, and some of these might seem obvious, but I thought I'm going to highlight them again. Add value. Make sure that what you are posting, the content you are posting, adds value to the readers, the viewers, to your audience. If it does not add value, if I ask you, oh, that's a really pretty picture, so what? Why should I care? This is Rochelle's favorite question. So what? Why should I care? If it's not adding value to that audience, don't waste your time, right? We have too much noise. We really want good quality value. Do tell stories. So we still like narratives, and in B2B, often there's a thought, oh, that's a B2C sort of tactic. I have worked with a lot of B2B companies where we break things up into smaller segments. So this week we might say, oh, here's how we calculate cost of ownership, related to our labor, right? And then next week we talk about, a different part of our cost of ownership or our ROI calculation. And we create a series, much like we're doing here with these webinars, right? Create a series, and in each part of that series, you highlight something else and something different, right? So tell your story, tell your narrative. It does not have to be one post. You can break it up into small, bite-sized, small, readable, quickly digestible pieces, but together they tell a complete story. Encourage conversations and discussions. And this can happen in a couple of ways. First of all, ask questions. Don't make statements, but ask questions. What do you guys think? Or put out a somewhat controversial opinion, right? I'm sure that's how you get conversations going. Discussions are not about the right answer. Discussions happen when there isn't a right answer, when it's very ambiguous what the right answer is. So, what about your industry? Are people thinking this is the way to do business and other people are thinking that's the way to do business? Maybe you create a little bit of a debate around that within your industry and you facilitate that. You facilitate it. Like, I just went to a workshop or conference and they said this, but I'm not sure I completely agree with that. What do you guys think? Right. So something around encouraging conversations and discussions, and definitely experiment, because you never really know, like not all the time, but do one or two experiments, try something a little new, maybe something a bit out of your comfort zone, and see how it does. You never know if that's going to work or not. Don'ts, don't do hard selling. None of us like to be sold, do a hard sell. None of us like to be pushed into a sale. So try to be, again, communal, try to highlight the benefits of what you're doing in your solutions, but also let people come to the realization that they need what you have to offer. So don't do that. Don't be generic. I always say the interesting parts are in the details. So don't be generic. Don't be just like everybody else. If you're going to talk about something, talk about how it really has impacted your business or how your business has come out of it. So bring the personal, even in business to business, about how this is part of your business story or your organizational story. That's what makes it interesting, not the parts that sound like every other organization or startup that's out there. So don't be generic. And obviously, don't ignore your community and any leads that you get from those interactions. So that's why that maintenance is really important, that you understand who's there and that when they're there, you respond and you thank them for their time and you thank them for their contributions, because that is a huge gift for them to come and interact with what you're doing. Um, then I would say next, I want to highlight a couple of things around some websites that you may or may not be familiar with, but sort of I find really interesting to find out about online social conversations or conversations and where they're happening. The first website is Social Mention. And Social Mention really is a website that goes through a variety, all the social networks, and it's kind of a one-stop shop. So you don't have to do the same search between basically, you don't have to go to Twitter and do a search and go to Facebook and do a search and LinkedIn and do a search. You can do it on Social Mention. I did this on content marketing recently, but you could do it on an industry term or something very specific to your industry and just see what's happening. They also have these sort of percentages in the top left-hand corner here on the screen of strength, sentiment, passion, and reach. I've put those definitions of what those mean at the end of my presentation today. So if you want to dig deeper, they are there. But it gives you a sense of where things are happening. You'll notice that content marketing, there's a lot happening, or there are a couple of things happening on Reddit. There's an infographic that's really huge. This is also where I figure out what kind of content, back to Catherine's question, what kind of content are people sort of putting out there in my particular area? So it gives me a sense of the variety of content and how things are doing. This is just a great place to start looking at what are the keywords, what are the sentiments, what are people interested in around specific topics. So Social Mention is something I would definitely recommend you check out. And the other one that I love is buzzsumo.com. And BuzzSumo is, it has a free version, but the free version only allows you a limited number of searches per day. The pro version allows you to get a few more insights, and you can do unlimited searches. So that's something that you could decide if that makes sense for you. What I love about BuzzSumo is it actually tells you how many people have sort of engaged with various topics on the various platforms. So this can also give you a better sense of some of the social media ones, kind of like, oh, where are people, for example, 43 pressing questions about a recipe for seduction. It had a lot of shares on Facebook, right? And I typed in content marketing. I don't know why that matched, but it gives you a sense of where is there a lot of activity, so you can get a better sense of where is your audience and where are they being most active, right? Without having to do a lot of guesswork around that. One of the questions that came up, the difference between B2B and B2C. So B2B is business to business. So I'm targeting businesses, so my customers or other businesses, and B2C would be sort of business to consumers, which would mean I'm targeting individual people, not necessarily a whole business. So a B2B business would be a company that is targeting other companies for their services. So SaaS companies, software as a service, tend to be targeting other SaaS companies for their services. It could be individuals, but they also would love to have enterprises using their tools and things like that. So that's sort of the difference there. Some other questions that are coming up. Yeah, so basically, I think that we really want to think about sort of BuzzSumo as a really good tool to find out where the conversations are happening. It's one lead. So now, last week, I talked about content, developing content, and lead magnets. I defined it, and I gave you sort of these five types of lead magnets in general categories. So warning, the next few slides are going to be a bit of a brain dump where I'm going to give you some ideas around each one of these. I will try to go through them relatively quickly, but if you have my presentation, I know that the link was posted in the chat. I'm just going to ask Liz to post it again. You can get all of these and you can start working through them yourself. So educational lead magnets. So the first thing that comes to mind are training, tutorials, how-tos, right? That makes sense. And even like a short course that you might want to do. Now, this could be a video tutorial. This could be an audio tutorial. This could be a written tutorial, or this could be a video transcript. And let me tell you that as much as we all love video, I actually run a business and we have lots of tutorials on how to use our tools. And we have a video and we have written steps on how to do things, because there's nothing more frustrating than realizing that what you want to do is in minute 4 or 3 out of a video, and you have to either watch the whole video to get to that point, or you just trying to figure out where in the steps you're getting lost. So sometimes having a video transcript and a video makes a lot of sense, especially with how-tos. Some people just like to have the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in front of them. So videos are great in terms of showing people what's possible. And some people are very visual, so that's how they follow along. But other people just want step 1 so they can do it, or print it out and then follow along on their computer and do it that way. So while video is awesome, don't forget that sometimes you need both, right? Something to keep in mind around that. Other things around it, sample chapter. So if you're offering something, it could be a sample chapter, it could be a sample video clip, maybe like kind of like a movie teaser, or an audio clip, right? To give them a sense of what they're going to get if that's what you will be delivering. If something educational, give them a little bit of a teaser of what they can do if they give you their name and their email address and they download the full version, right? So basically a sample of what they're doing. Or it could be a downloadable ebook, PDF, report, guide, audiobook. I'm just giving you a lot of options here that you could do. So depending on your audience, what is the kind of educational content and what format would they like to have it in? I've also seen really done quite well mind maps, concept maps, or framework. If you've created something, this is how you do things. Here's a general framework, guidelines, or just this is how these concepts relate to each other. Can be really quite exciting. So again, a lead magnet, you might have that information and maybe you have a really low res version of it that they can see, but if they give you their name and email, they'll get the high res version of it. And, or maybe they can edit it and, add their own thoughts to it. Infographics are huge as well, as a wonderful educational lead magnet, top 10 things that you need to do, or, statistics or whatever it might be. So I'm sure we're all familiar with infographics. Webinar sign up or event tickets. So again, signing up for a webinar. So give me your name and email and you can be come to our webinar, or maybe we're giving tickets away to a very specific event. Again, here's the thing. You don't have to do all the webinars. Maybe you actually buy some tickets to a really great webinar that your customers would love to attend, or maybe you can get some free tickets from someone. That's always a great thing to do, especially in B2B. So again, don't limit yourself to, oh, it has to be mine. You can also do other kinds of giveaways of other things that you have access to. Predictions and forecasts. So, what am I predicting? We saw a lot of these at the end of last year, predictions for 2021. What are the 2021 trends in our industry? Everybody likes to sort of find out those things. Maybe there's a presentation that you've done that they can access by giving you their name and email address or contact information. Maybe there are newsletters, which will then have educational information in them. Maybe it's access to a virtual library. Maybe you have some content or pieces or information or market research that is behind a bit of a firewall, if you will. And to get access to it, they have to give you their name and email address. So again, if you've collected content and you have a collection of any sort, maybe that's something that they will find helpful. If you've done market research, so any market research you've done in aggregate, if you've created something around, here's what we're seeing our customers doing, and here are the trends, and here's what we're seeing in the market research from our market, that's always really quite valuable. Or a roundup where you've basically pulled together all the resources. We love that too. Instead of me having to go on the internet and find all the resources, maybe you've brought them all together in a nice, beautiful package. So people can do that and it saves them time. So that would be definitely something they might give you contact information for. And then finally, recordings. So recordings of webinars, recordings of things that you've done. The other thing I've been seeing a lot more replays with additional commentary. So maybe there was an event that happened, maybe an event in your industry. So you take that and you might want to add some additional commentary around what was discussed or things that were happening, right? So it depends on who your audience is, but there is a way to add value to something. So it's not just a replay or recording, but there's some additional commentary that makes it even richer the second time or third time through, right? So something to keep in mind around that. Then I would say, here's the next thing, useful magnets. So here are useful magnets. So cheat sheets, any kind of cheat sheet that you have, or checklists. We love checklists, making sure that we're checking all the boxes and we haven't forgotten anything. Does that make sense in your industry? Are there things that people sort of procedures or policies that, things that people have to remember and make sure that they don't miss? Maybe that's something you can do. Calculators, we've talked a lot about ROI, return on investment, or cost of ownership calculators. Maybe you give them an Excel spreadsheet for them to figure this out. Depends on how complex your industry is, but sometimes if it's very simple, that might be a reason for them to give you their information. Obviously, case studies and examples are really helpful and useful for them to see how things have applied. Templates or swipe files are something that I definitely would recommend as well. So templates, a template, for example, one of the links I've given you is to HubSpot. And HubSpot is asking for your name and email address, and then you get a content calendar template, right? And it's several worksheets and they all tie together. So if there are templates and you have some complicated sort of relationships, maybe you create a template so that others don't have to go through that work. Or what we call swipe files. So swipe files are basically files that other people can swipe, that they can use for their own purposes. And those files could be either digital or maybe even printable, right? So templates might be a printable template, but it also could be a digital one. So just keep in mind, are there files that people might find helpful as a starting point so they don't have to start from scratch? In the design space, we see a lot of toolkits. So these are sort of, maybe you have a certain design, some themes, WordPress themes, right? Or digital assets for Adobe Photoshop, or things in that, or icon sets. So there are toolkits, and if you give me your name, we'll give you a little toolkit of assets, digital assets that you can then use in what you're doing. For coding, one of the things that we are talking about for coding are scripts. So there might be some scripts that you want to talk about. So scripts would be something to keep in mind. So a script is, something that someone may not have to come up with on their own. So that may be a good reason. Maybe it's a small piece of script that you've created that, again, they'd be more than happy to give you their ideas. List of resources and inspirations. So again, the list of resources and inspirations, calendars, any kind of plan or planners, worksheets, spreadsheet templates, all of these are very useful. What are the tools of your industry? And what have you created to make your life easier that maybe others would really appreciate, right? It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a software piece. It doesn't have to be a mobile app. Maybe it's just a small piece of what you do on a daily basis that would help others in your industry as well. Idea generators. So maybe it's something that gives you some really cool ideas and things that, like if people have to be creative, sometimes that's really nice. It could be a recipe, and that recipe could be literally how do we do specific things, or it could be food recipe, but it also could be a procedural recipe as well. And then finally, I would say on the useful side, Coles or Cliff Notes, depending on where you're from, but generally summaries of things. So instead of me having to read a long article, maybe you've summarized, the key things from a specific post or lessons learned, or maybe state of the industry. What is the state of our industry and what does that mean and how does that work? One of the questions again was, what is a lead magnet? So a lead magnet is usually a piece of content that you have that you will usually host or promote on your website. And what you do is, in exchange for someone receiving this piece of content, they have to give you some information about themselves. So usually it's a contact information or something along those lines. So usually it's a name or an email address. I'm sure many of us have gone to a website where they talk about, ooh, this great blah, and then XYZ, and then you have to, but to get it, you have to enter some contact information to receive it. So that's what a lead magnet is. And so then I would say the next thing are community building lead magnets. So these are things where you are actually creating a community, almost like a niche community for your audience. And this really depends on how large your audience is, because you don't want it to be too small that people don't talk or there aren't enough people to talk. But basically the idea here is to build community, and you are sort of fostering community. So one of the common ones we see are direct challenges. So this is where you might challenge others to do things. We see a lot of this in the new year. I saw this with, I think it was sort of one of the healthcare companies had challenges for anyone who had their healthcare to go out and exercise more, right? So, again, direct challenges to allow people to challenge themselves depending on what it is they want to do, or businesses. Maybe you create a membership site from a B2B membership site. So by coming to the site, you become a member, signing up, and then you offer certain perks for anyone who's a member. It might be something else. Generally, what we're talking about here are vertical or niche group forums, and there are a lot of different ways that this can happen. I've listed here a couple of open social networks and open sort of alternatives. So Mastodon allows you to create a Twitter-like standalone open Twitter community, if that makes sense for your community. PixelFed is an Instagram one. Okuna is another open social network. And Mahara is one if you are working with creative in the creative arts space around open e-portfolios where people can share portfolios, and you can create a very visual social network there as well. Now, in the notes, my links, I have a link to 149 open source social networking options. So I welcome you to look at those later on. These are just a few that I've seen and I've seen used successfully. Slack forum, obviously just create a Slack forum where people can chat. So it doesn't have to be super fancy. It depends on who they are. But back to last week, customer personas, are they chatty? Will they talk? If that is not who your customers are, don't create a community building don't create a community forum if that doesn't make sense for the people that you are targeting. And then we obviously have Facebook, LinkedIn groups, and different things. So sometimes it's like, go where they are. And if they are already on LinkedIn, then maybe that's the best place to create that community and try to spearhead those discussions, if that makes sense, and be seen as sort of the leader of these interesting conversations there as well. But make sure you have the time to do it, because it does take time to do that. Finally, entertaining lead magnets. So again, people go, oh, well, that's very business to consumer, but B2B, I've seen this done very well as well. So quizzes can be about, oh, what software packages are you using? Or what types of packages do you find most interesting? So it can be very industry specific, but it can also be fun and entertaining. So I have seen that used as well. What character are you from XYZ book or XYZ movie? So if you have those kinds of sort of cultural references within your industry, that might be something to consider. Surveys are really great to do. So just surveying people. I saw a lot of polls and surveys happening at the beginning of 2021. People on LinkedIn just asking, hey, people, what are your goals for this year? Simple question, right? And people were just saying, oh, this year we hope to do this as a business. We hope to, so not just people, but businesses. What are your business goals? What are your organizational goals? So find things that make sense and time those in an interesting way. Giveaways, I've talked about giveaways. You can give away obviously things we've seen in the consumer space like tablets and iPads and iPhones and things like that. But what are the giveaways that would be really, what are the tools or resources that your industry and your customers would really enjoy? So make sure that the giveaways are not just tech. If the tech doesn't really help them do their job, no one cares. So what are the tools and resources that they would love to have to help them do their job better, faster, more easily? Those are the things you want to give away. Comic strips. So anyone ever remember there was one once called Dilbert, which was very much about the office environment. Comic strips do not have to be about, like just funny things in the world. They can be about your industry. And I will, below I've given you a link to some tools that are drag and drop, and you can create comic strips about your industry. So that's something to keep in mind. List of quotes. Maybe they want to do some quotes or quotography. I'm not sure if you've heard that term, but basically it's usually where there's a picture with a quote on front of it. So photography with a quote on it, quotography, something inspiring, if that makes sense again for your audience. Desktop wallpaper. I know that seems really interesting around sort of the desktop. Especially now that most of us are in front of or behind a computer a lot, they have come back and they've had a resurgence. So desktop wallpaper. But more importantly, I would say the next thing are Zoom virtual backgrounds. Did you know you could create a Zoom virtual background with your brand or something related to your brand or something really cool and interesting that perhaps your customers might find entertaining or fun, right? So, if there's, again, some cultural things or, industry things that are very much part of the, the fun part of what you guys do, create a Zoom virtual background and let your colleagues know, use it. A web or mobile app, any game, something very interactive. Again, if you have the skills to do this, this is great. It's a little more ambitious, but a lot of people are giving away, or there are lots of sort of mobile apps and web app templates. Again, they're templates. And so you can often take something and create your own version of it. If, again, that makes sense. B2B may not, but I don't know every B2B industry. So I think we have to be careful at saying, no, B2B has to be serious. Not necessarily, right? Maybe it's something about certain tools in your industry or certain, are you this kind of coder or that kind of coder, right? Again, think about the fun things you can do. And maybe it's even a manifesto where you're saying, this is what we believe. Anyone who wants to be part of this, sign up. Would love for you to be part of this and make sure that you understand what's going on. Finally, I want to get to sort of bottom of the funnel lead magnets. These are the things that most of us in B2B are very familiar with. So free shipping, free trial, and that free trial could be of a service, it could be of a course, it could be of a product. So free trial is really getting them to sign up with their name. So have you ever thought of when you sign up for something for free that literally what they're asking you for is your email and name so that they can continue to talk to you and connect with you and sell you things and upsell you on perhaps something that, the premium services, not just the free stuff. Coupon and discount codes, free service sessions. So maybe you are a consultation or a coaching session. Maybe that's what you're going to do. We'll sit down with you. We'll look at your business and we'll identify where all the waste is, right? That's really compelling. So is that something that you can do? Is that something that makes sense for what you're doing? Maybe a free quote, again, to give them a sense of what you can do for them. Instant access to a free add-on or premium service. So if you sign up now, we'll give you this particular premium service for free, so again, a real reason to upsell them or, or cross sell them on other services or products. We've all seen this buy one, get one offer. So buy one, get one free, half price. We bundle it, we get something together. So create bundles. We love bundles. Bundles also allow you to not be price compared exactly with your competitors because you're bundling it and you're offering more value, right? Maybe you have a catalog. You have a catalog you've pulled together. And so they might be, give us your name and you'll get access to this catalog of content, catalog of templates. So maybe it's not the one-offs that we were talking about before, but it's actually a collection of things. Case studies, again, can be something that they could get access to. Case studies of how people have used our tools specifically in specific industries would be a great thing to perhaps push them over to get their name and contact information. And in some cases, it might be literally moving up a waiting list. If you give us your information, we will actually, move you up a waiting list. If you have a lot of people waiting for your product or service, or it's invite only, this may be, we've seen a lot of that on the web. I think someone was mentioning, am I on Clubhouse? I am on Clubhouse. My thoughts are, I think that jury's still out. It's quite early, Colin, but again, it's invite only. So you have to find someone, and someone has to find you in order to be on Clubhouse. So I think that Clubhouse could be a great way to create community. It's really early days, and it depends a lot on the community that you have and how willing are they to join yet another new community space, right? So I think that's always my biggest question. Moving people to a platform is very difficult. So finally, action items. Answer these questions. First up, answer these questions. Make sure you understand what you're doing, what, why, how, where, when, and who. Answer these questions, and it'll answer a lot of the things that people ask about content strategy well before you even start thinking about the tactics. And then once you do that, take all of those things that I listed before and map them against different parts of your conversion funnel. When do they need education? When do they need that bottom of the funnel sort of pieces? When do they need maybe something entertaining? When is it informative? When is it entertaining? And you can have multiple pieces of content in each one of these various areas, but map it so that you then know you're also providing content for people throughout that entire customer journey. That's really important. So do that. I have several slides, and these are mostly articles on this page. 69 highly effective lead magnet ideas. Many of the ideas I mentioned today are in that article with examples, with more details. So I'd recommend, if you are like, oh, I want to know more, first link for sure. Another place where to find 100 plus free lead magnet templates. So again, some information there, some content calendar templates, content creation things. So freebie content creation sites. So how do I create infographics for free? How do I create a podcast for free? A variety of things, music, audio, videos. That's a great article there. Some stock video, stock images, stock audio resources. The top, as I said, 149 social network open source projects. They all have different requirements. So I'm not saying they're all for you, but you might want to check that out. And then I also talked about the 10 best podcast hosting platforms, which includes some relatively, most of them are fairly inexpensive, but even free, some free solutions, why you would do that and how you would do that. And on my final page of my presentation, I have a bunch of specific links of tools that I've used and what they do. So if you're doing infographics, I would say Canva and PictoChart are probably the best one. Visme is also a really good infographic creator. They have lots of templates to start with, and all you have to do is then change words and add your content. You can even upload your own photos and images. So that's a great place to start with some beautifully designed infographics without having to be a designer. And then a lot of other places where you can just get free information. Pixton is a great comic strip maker and definitely something you should check out. Biteable has some great explainer video templates, and drawing videos. So all of these are just some resources that I've used, and I thought you might appreciate them as you decide to explore your own content needs. And I would recommend that you check them out. Some, obviously, anything that's free has pros and cons, so none of them are perfect, but hopefully they make sense with what you're doing. So with that, thank you guys for sharing. I'm 7 minutes over. I do apologize, but I want to thank you for sticking with me. And I want to thank you for all the time that you've done. And hopefully I will see you next week when we basically tackle websites and landing pages. So again, making sure that when you bring people to your website, that you actually can convert them, and what are some best practices. We're going to talk about on-site, off-site SEO from a website perspective. We'll deal with pay-per-click and everything else in future weeks. So thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. I know it was a lot of content. Again, I hope that the links help you, and please let me know if you have any questions moving forward. So thank you,
Rochelle.
everyone.
That was super jam-packed. I think I already know I'm going to rewatch this video. Really appreciate you taking the time of assembling all those resources, because half the thing is like you Google something and it's like, is this any good?
Yeah.
So yeah, Awesome. So thank you very much, Rochelle. Thank you everyone for joining us and for staying a few minutes over. And we will see you next week.